adolescent brain, okay? And so I bet that all of you have contact with an adolescent. And if not, you were one, so this might shed some insight on yourself as an adolescent too. But anyway, I am not a neuropsychologist or anything, but this information mostly comes from this book, which is called Age of Opportunity. It's by Lawrence Steinberg. His qualifications are that he is a developmental neuropsychologist, PhD. Also, he has spent 40 years doing research on this topic. And this book is kind of the culmination of his thoughts about the adolescent brain. And as we'll talk about, there's an upside and a downside to the adolescent brain. In the title of the book, The Age of Opportunity, he's choosing to emphasize the upside, because adolescence is a time of great opportunity when it comes to brain development. So when an infant is born, brand new infant, in their brain they have 100 billion neurons, which is the same as the number of stars in our galaxy-ish. And so it's very interesting, all that time growing, but very few of those neurons are actually connected in meaningful ways with a newborn. So they're born as kind of a blank slate of all these billions of neurons. If you remember from your high school biology or science in college, neurons have an axon and a dendrite, and they form connections. And neural circuits are what our brains are made up of. So those connections are important. And as when an infant is born, the stimulus around them, the environmental stimulus, meaning anything that they see or hear or touch or any sensory input they get, starts to build connections between their neurons and their brain. And I don't want to get the number wrong, but I believe he says that in the first 6 months after birth, 100,000 new connections between neurons are formed every second. Every second. So they call that exuberant. That's a scientific term for that. It's very exuberant, right? That's a lot of connections. And that's just crazy. And we all kind of know, I think we all kind of know that early childhood stage, it's kind of super important. And if kids are, have trauma or neglect or something, as infants, you see that throughout their lives, and it's because they're in a stage where their brain is really forming in major ways. But what we may not all know is that another time of great, what we call neuroplasticity, is adolescence. So there comes a stage for an infant when they get a little older and start to become like a preschool age, where they're not making as many connections and their brain is more stable, and that continues throughout elementary school years until we hit puberty. And then we have this other major reorganization of the brain that occurs during adolescence, which you may or may not know. And so in science they call it neuroplasticity. So plastic meaning malleable as opposed to like metal being set, And so a brain that is neuroplastic can change. Now all of our brains, even though we're adults, have some neuroplasticity. In fact, you sitting here listening to me say this is changing your brain right now. If you didn't have neuroplasticity, you couldn't learn because you couldn't make new connections. However, the kind of neuroplasticity that adults have and that elementary kids have does not alter the fundamental neural structure of our brains. But in adolescence and in early childhood, that's developmental plasticity, which means we're actually growing whole new circuits of cells, and we're rearranging massively the way that the brain is organized. So that is a much more major event. In the book, he compares the difference between those two things to reading a book versus learning to read. Learning to read is a major accomplishment, a lot of effort, a major breakthrough in your development. Reading a book, well, you do it all the time. And that's kind of the difference between an adult brain and an adolescent or an early childhood brain. So that gives you an idea of what adolescents are dealing with. And what really is happening in their brain is that a lot of their circuits are becoming streamlined, and they're forming connections between parts of their brain that are strengthened as they become adults. And so we call it neural pruning, like pruning a tree, because what happens is the circuits that are becoming more efficient and more connected, all the extraneous circuits are being pruned away. And so it's kind of true that what adolescents do form a big basis of who they will become and the ways that they think in the future. Adolescents adolescence we need to define, because today adolescence is longer than it's ever been in the history of man. And it's because in science they define it as starting with biology, which means the onset of the symptoms of puberty, or again, I don't know if they're symptoms or what you call them. They feel like symptoms, right? That sounded kind of negative, sorry. The manifestations of puberty. And so puberty starting earlier and earlier, and if you want a really interesting read, there's a chapter or a section in there about why is puberty starting so early, and there are a lot of reasons. Interestingly enough, the hormone that starts the cascade of, or the neurotransmitter that starts the cascade of hormones is called kisspeptin, and it's called that because it was discovered in Hershey, Pennsylvania, so they decided to call it kisspeptin. But anyway, it's affected by things like leptin, which is a hormone in fat cells, and also by melatonin, which is a sleep hormone. And so if you're in more sun, or if you have more fat, you tend to go through puberty sooner. And it's just an interesting thing. It's partly genetic, it's partly environmental. Anyway, so that's kind of an interesting thing, but it can start as early as 10 years old now, puberty. And then they don't agree on biological ways to say when is someone an adult, when is puberty over, when is adolescence over. And so they define it culturally and socially, and they say that when someone has assumed adult responsibilities, then adolescence is over. So that could, more traditionally in past years, have meant marriage. Nowadays it could mean moving out and having your own job, those sorts of things. And those things tend to be happening, at least in our culture, later and later. So we have this kind of large window that could be considered adolescence. Oops. Sorry. Make sure that's the next one. Yeah. All right, so there are three major parts of the adolescent brain, major systems, that change incredibly during adolescence. And he's got 3 R's to help you remember. It's the reward system, the relationship system, and the regulatory system. These are the most responsive to stimulation when you're an adolescent. And they are determined by genetics and environment, but like I said before, you can affect a lot of change in an adolescent, but you can also potentially harm an adolescent, depending on what happens. So, reward. So the pleasure neurotransmitter is dopamine. You've probably heard that before. And an adolescent brain does not have more dopamine, but it has more receptors for dopamine. And so adolescents, they feel things strongly. They really do. And they are kind of sensory seeking. They like loud music, and they look for all the things that give us pleasure, like money or acquiring things or sexual things or even social things like praise or encouragement from other people. Adolescents are more sensitive to them because they have more dopamine receptors, and it heightens their pleasure. And so in the book he says, think back on your own adolescence, and sometimes we remember the things that are associated with heightened emotion or pleasure better. And he hypothesizes, maybe that's why we still like that music from the 80s, We just can't get past it because that was the time, man. Like, there's nothing like the taste of food or the sound of that music or those interactions with your friends when you're in adolescence. And that's a kind of a cool thing about the adolescent brain. And then you ask yourself, well, what is the point of adolescence anyway? You see little kids that are in early childhood and they start to become physically independent from you. So they want to run out and chase a car, and then your job is to go stop them from killing themselves, right? But as soon as anything goes wrong, they're right back to mom. And in adolescence, it's kind of the same thing, only it's intellectual and social. They want independence. We're not cool anymore. But if anything goes wrong, they're going to be running right back to us. So in the brain, there are 2 systems. Well, there's more than 2 systems, but 2 that are not connected until the very end of brain development. They're not strongly connected. So in an adult, you've got your limbic system and your prefrontal cortex. Your limbic system is kind of like your sentry to your brain. Its job is to see what's going on around you, cause an emotion that causes you to deal with what's going on around you. So when the limbic system starts going into overdrive in adolescence, and this is why, I have a 13-year-old, well, he's 14 this weekend, but this is why he's so prone to overreacting, right? Everything's an emotion, and it's highs and lows. And that's the limbic system. And then the prefrontal cortex is the thinking part of your brain, the part that's logical and rational and can make wise decisions. And it's just not very connected in adolescence. And so you get a lot of sensory seeking and, whoa, I feel so strongly, but I don't have the reasoning ability to mitigate that. And so you get a lot of risk-taking behavior in adolescence. And the reason why it says here, now you see it, now you don't, is because it is true that there's not an absence of connection there, it's just not fully connected until you're actually 25 years old. And so I think the rental car companies already knew this, right? But anyway, so as that connection it's there, and different kids are different, but what happens is sometimes they will be very logical and you're like, I can totally trust this kid, I see them making rational choices. But the problem is their limbic system is so much in overdrive that when they're under stress or fatigue or high emotion, they lose all ability for that. So it's kind of now you see it, now you don't. So don't make the mistake of looking at your teenager and going, you know, this one's a good one. Yeah, she totally knows how to make the good decision. I'm not going to worry about her ever. No, worry, because as soon as there's a situation, that goes out the window. So what can parents and educators do about this? Supervision, know where your kids are, and help them stay out of the situation that might be dangerous because they just may not have the sense of the brain to do it. I mean, their neuropruning means a lot for them. And so provide them with positive and meaningful incentives. If they're stressed or tired, be prepared that that's probably the time they're going to make a bad decision. And adults do that too, but adults are more able to turn off that emotion and focus on the rational than teenagers are. And then acknowledge their joyfulness. Remember how fun it was to be a teenager, I was with a whole bunch of our middle schoolers last night because they were at my son's birthday party and they were doing an escape room, and it was really fun. They're funny and creative, and they just feel joy in the silliest thing, So that's awesome. And then try to honor their desire to be independent and but still provide that stability for them. All right, relationships. You may have noticed that teenagers are really into relationships, and maybe not so much yours anymore, but their friends, okay? And they are starting to really develop the part of their brain that recognizes other people's emotions, and is this social brain. In fact, they hypothesize that some kids with autism have issues in that social brain part of their brain, and they have difficulty deciding what other people's emotions are. But when a teenager is starting to be better at this whole, and this is good because it can promote empathy, right? But as they're starting to be better at that, they often will misjudge what your emotions are or really exaggerate them. So, I even had this with my son. I texted him a sentence with a period at the end, like, I'm waiting, period. And he's like, why are you so mad? And I found out that they don't use periods anymore unless you're mad, right? Okay. But anyway, this is an overreaction, right? And that happens a lot. Peer effects. So we've all heard of peer pressure. And studies have shown, and I think this is really interesting, that peer pressure, we think of it as, okay, here's my kid, they're in a situation, and all these other terrible kids are like, do it, or whatever, And you've got to withstand that peer pressure. Actually, scientific studies have shown that just knowing your peers are anywhere near or know what you're doing, even if it's long distance, causes more risky behavior in teenagers. So there's just something about that, and it's good to be aware of that as a parent. And if you think about it, he calls it a perfect neurobiological storm for being self-conscious. You have a heightened awareness of other people's emotions, and you're trying to work out all these social things. At the same time, you're trying to distance yourself from your parents because they're not cool anymore. And then you've got all these changes in your body. It's like the perfect time that I remember this. I remember feeling like, I remember feeling like everybody was looking at me all the time. And if anybody sat by me and they were like a boy and his leg touched my leg, it was like, my boy's leg is touching my leg. It's just, you're very self-conscious at that age. And it's very painful to be rejected when you're a teenager. You're figuring out your social hierarchy, and rejection is painful to the point of physical pain. In fact, studies have shown that acetaminophen can help alleviate the physical or the emotional pain of rejection in teenagers. So it's a serious thing and to be taken seriously. What can we do? Well, they catalog 3 different different styles of parenting. There's permissive, meaning I'm your buddy and we're going to be best friends and whatever you want to do, I'll help that happen. Then there's autocratic, like it's my way and why? Because I said so. And then there's authoritative, which is what we should aim for. It's warmth and love, but with firm guidelines and boundaries. Because teenagers need boundaries the same way that toddlers need boundaries. And so it's a way of thinking of yourself a little bit more as a guide or an advisor. Like, you know, I'm happy to guide you here, and then sometimes no is no because I'm the parent. You probably already know all that. You're excellent parents. And then regulation. So this one is, I think, one of the most interesting ones. So regulation means being able to control yourself. And they did an interesting, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you all of this, but they did an interesting study at Stanford years ago. This is kind of classic. It's called the marshmallow test. And what they did is they brought some little kids in and they said, got a marshmallow here, and they stuck it in front of them and they said, now you can eat that marshmallow as soon as I leave if you want, but if you can wait a few minutes, then when I come back in I'll give you another marshmallow and then you'll have two. And then they cataloged, you know, how the kids reacted, what they did, and then they followed them throughout the rest of their lives to see if there was a correlation with the ability to delay gratification and success in various areas. So I'll show you just a little of this if the clip will work. Wait.
First, you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another. So then I want you to stay in here, stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right.
Sure, it's gonna work out. I'm not sure the internet here is quite up to streaming my little video, but darn it. You know what, I'm just going to talk you through it. I'll just turn it around. We're close to the end.
Thing projector?
I mean, I can turn this around. So there's no exciting picture right now. So I'll just say, yeah. So why is this good for us? Well, it's good for educators and parents because only 25% of school performance is based on intellectual factors. And 75% is based on motivational factors. Sometimes we call these non-cognitive things like persistence and determination. And those are more predictive of real-world success than intellect or talent, believe it or not. So you can be as smart as you want, but you could end up being a janitor if you don't have people skills and the ability to persevere and all these other things that are important in life. Another interesting thing is that, there's where we went wrong. Okay, so these are the things they followed in the marshmallow test. Success at work, academic achievement, even satisfying relationships, and physical and mental health were better in the kids that could delay their gratification. So why is this good news? Well, because for adolescents, I don't know if you know, but intelligence is fairly genetically determined, so you can change IQ a little bit, but not a whole lot. There's a pretty narrow margin. But when it comes to the influence of your genes on self-control and non-cognitive skills, it's only about half as much influence. So it's really an area where the environment can change the way the brain is organized. So he says that moving an adolescent with poor impulse control into an environment that encourages better self-regulation can make a real difference for them. And it's a time when it can because of that neuroplasticity and the development of their brain. So that's why it's an age of opportunity. And he suggests there are 5 different things that are currently being researched on how do we, in adolescence, how do we train kids to have better self-regulation, training working memory, so there's all these things you might have seen like luminosity and stuff that train your brain to hold more in working memory. Those are currently being studied. Mindfulness meditation, because you're thinking about your body and you're doing a mind-brain or a mind-body connection. Aerobic exercise, and especially aerobic exercise that requires coordination and thought. So like rock climbing is a very mental sport. Yoga, you're thinking about your body, you're doing all these different moves. And training in specific self-regulation skills, that's like when you sit down and go, how can we manage our anger? Like what strategies can we do to control, and what does our body feel like when we get angry, and what are we going to do when that happens? So all those things, as long as they're challenging and sustained, meaning you keep doing them, and scaffolded so they're not overwhelming, those are all good strategies for teenagers. And then I ended with a few quotes from Maria Montessori because I work at a Montessori school, and one of our big things is movement integrated with learning, and never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. So just to close, I would say that if you're looking for self-esteem for your adolescent, it comes from actually being able to do things. And they're not dumb. Just giving them empty praise is meaningless because they know whether or not they can do something. They know whether or not they feel capable. And having them do things, even like cook dinner or whatever those things are, that actually builds their self-esteem because they become capable of doing hard things. And then I would also say in closing that neuropruning is literally losing your mind. So your adolescents are losing their minds, quite literally. So keep that in mind and be sweet to them. And I don't know if you have any questions that I could or couldn't answer. Yes, Steve?
I have a thought while you're talking about, I've seen the experiments numbers of times about kids choosing to wait or to not wait for marshmallows. I'm not sure how much research has ever been done into the kids that do choose the marshmallow first and what are the strengths that they have versus, I feel like I've become an overregulator because I've heard that so much in my life that I can't make spontaneous decisions.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some balance in there too for the kids that are good at just saying, I want that marshmallow, I want it right now.
Yeah. I mean, that would be interesting. I don't know of anything that they're currently researching, but I think they are looking at, since the outcomes seem worse for those kids, the reason why they're doing the research in adolescence is, can we change some of those outcomes when we have that other opportunity for our brain to be flexible?
Yeah.
So all those studies are interesting, and I don't know.
I guess I'm advocating for some balance. We should we should appreciate the spontaneity of our teenagers also.
And
that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think it would be interesting to track things that you wouldn't so much think of as success, like, is that child a more creative child? Is that child, I don't know. There are a lot of other things, so that's a good point.
They could run for president.
Yeah, let's not go there, Ben. I can't do that today.
Well, I think, sorry, if I could just make a comment about that. To me, it's sort of like, those are ends of the spectrum. Right now, we live in a world where delayed gratification is pretty important. But maybe there only was one buffalo, and the guy who got first was the one who was right. That's true. There's some balance there.
Yeah.
Place for both.
So this is outside your area. Yeah. So we have the drinking age in America is 21. A lot of people started before that. Do we know? I don't want to say what's the ideal age to start getting drunk, but that's really the question. Like, at what point does that become like, what stage is that really damaging versus you kind of get over it?
They actually have done a lot of studies on that because the adolescent brain is also prone for addiction, more prone for addiction than the adult brain because of the changes that are happening. And so having, nicotine, alcohol, other drugs, even caffeine, the brain is more responsive and more likely to, I guess, engage in addiction patterns, which I don't know about, but he does mention that in the book. I think it would probably be wise to have your brain developed before. I don't know. It's interesting. And there might be issues of moderation versus,
Yeah, it's in cultures where kids grow up drinking, it's just part of everyday life. They don't have the same kinds of issues with binge drinking that we have because you put the limits at a certain place in your life. All of a sudden, now you're responsible to go out and get drunk. Where if you're in Germany, you're drinking table beer from the time you're 6. Yeah,
I actually saw that when I was in France, and we ordered some cider for the kids, and it was hard cider. And my kids were like, I don't know, 8. And I was like, oh, les enfants. And they're like, what? So, it's a different thing. I don't know. It's interesting. Yes, Mark.
I noticed on your parental strategies that guilt was missing. Which is the main strategy. And, so this is more of a comment, but, the fact that, guilt imposed by parents, is one thing, but then they also pass the buck upstairs.
Yeah.
So you have a whole other level of guilt that you can never escape.
Right.
And the relationship between that than guilt that, you know, you can really inflict on adolescents, and responsibility, I think, would also be a very interesting discussion, because I think you don't learn responsibility when you're being motivated through guilt.
Yeah, there is one thing that he talks about, and that is something that you'll find in like Love and Logic or Cognitive Discipline, but he talks about the fact that when you make it because I said so and you're the inflictor of the consequence or whatever, it's very easy for the child to make you the bad guy then. When you're more of a guide and you say, oh shoot, how did that work out for you? You know, and you're really concerned. I mean, you might have known it wasn't going to work out, but anyway, you take that away. You take that target off your back, and the child is more likely to think, oh yeah, I did that thing, and that's how it worked out. Yeah, I probably should do that thing. But it doesn't have to be guilt. You know, you're not saying to be a good person and to please me, and for me to love you, you have to do this. You're more talking about, you know, how did that work for you? What do you think happened? You know, so I think those are, there's a whole other realm. It's a whole other talk about, you know, religion and rejection based on religion. So it's interesting. Yes.
I just had a quick question on the three styles of parenting or educating.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going through my studies having the hardest time remembering the difference between authoritative and authoritarian. And it looked like on your slide they changed the word for it, because it called it like autocratic.
They called it autocratic to make it seem more tyrannical.
Well, but like, I wish they would have done that back in my studies, because authoritative and authoritarian are so close a word that I had the hardest time remembering which was which.
Which one am I supposed to do?
So I was pleased to see that somebody finally realized that there was a problem there.
Yeah, change it to autocratic. Yeah, autocratic, it sounds bad.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Okay. Thank you for letting me do